This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'll talk about the X Factor. This is Elon Musk's bold vision for a new Twitter brand, a rebrand called X. I'll review an article comically insisting that blue states are more livable than red states. Former GOP Congresswoman Myra Flores joins me. We're going to talk about her planned 2024 run. And while Kamala Harris says the Florida GOP is not teaching the full story of slavery, I'll reveal how the Democratic Party is hiding its own complicity in that peculiar institution. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
Have you heard? Twitter is no more. Twitter is officially metamorphosing into X. This is the rebranding of the app, of the platform by Elon Musk and by the CEO, Linda Yaccarino. Now, this whole thing has generated quite a stir on Twitter itself. People, of course, are used to Twitter. They're used to tweeting. They're used to the little Tweety bird that is the symbol of Twitter. And so it has been since the beginning of this particular and peculiar app. But not only has Elon Musk changed Twitter into a largely free speech platform, it's just a much more fun place than it was. It was kind of a chill on Twitter in the aftermath of the election with all the censorship going on. Of course, the censorship is still going on YouTube and on Facebook/Meta. So Twitter is just a fun place to be, a better place to be, a more vibrant place to be, and all the nonsense about, oh, there's a rising tide of hate speech. Well, no, there isn't. I don't see it. You don't see it. And there's no evidence for it. So the media is really just upset and angry that you've got a platform that is not succumbing to censorship. Now, Elon Musk has a fascination with the concept of X. Of course, he has the company called SpaceX. And for him, X seems to signify kind of everything. This is a little bit odd because, of course, for other people, X has very different connotations, X-rated, for example. But nevertheless, for Elon Musk, X is a kind of iconic symbol of comprehensiveness. And this is the important thing. There's a lot of back and forth on Twitter about which is a better name. And even I played along with this. I ran a little poll. Do you prefer the name Twitter? Do you prefer the name X? Twitter, of course, came out ahead. Not a big surprise because, of course, Twitter is what people are used to. But the real point is not the name per se. It is really what Elon Musk wants to do with the platform. And a lot of the media reports are kind of missing this bigger picture. So, for example, there's an article here about Twitter, about Elon Musk putting a big X on the Twitter building, taking down the bird sign. Evidently, he didn't get a proper permit to do the work, so the work was stopped. And, well, okay, all of this is interesting mildly. But to me, what's really more interesting is the notion that Elon Musk wants Twitter to be something more than Twitter. Well, what? Twitter in itself is really good. It's this kind of feisty place where there's a lot of engagement. I particularly like the idea of these Twitter threads, which are ways of dealing with a detailed topic, but doing it in multiple posts that are kind of linked to each other. And Twitter is also a place for engagement because it's a free speech platform. I can go on, see what Barack Obama is saying and reply to him. And that way, a lot of the people who are following Obama get to see what I'm saying. And so it's a way to sort of reach across the aisle and either in a pungent way or even in a substantive way, get through to the other side. But it seems for Elon Musk, he wants this new X platform to be, well, I'm going to call it Twitter plus Facebook plus YouTube plus Amazon. Well, that's a lot, right? Because He's talking about an app that doesn't just include enormous capacities for video. That would challenge the supremacy of YouTube. By the way, YouTube is already being challenged by Rumble. But the point is, Twitter would also be getting into the long-form video business. People would be able to post, presumably, podcasts and other long-form video on Twitter directly. Number two, Twitter would also now include much more capacity. First of all, the limit of tweeting only a certain number of letters, likely to disappear over time. People could do a lot more in the form of private messaging, a lot more in the form of contacting people that they lost touch with. So in other words, the Facebook aspect of Twitter and the Instagram aspect, the posting of photos, all becomes imported into Twitter. The really interesting part is the advertising and Amazon piece of this, because Elon Musk wants Twitter to be a place where advertisers can not only display their wares, so to speak, but have one-click shopping. So you see an ad, you click, you buy. And if Twitter becomes a place where people are shopping all the time, then the question becomes, why do you need Amazon? Well, obviously the Amazon model is you can go on Amazon and search for a product and then find it and buy it. I think Twitter's initial model is not that. Its initial model is that you watch an ad, either a print ad or a video ad, and you decide, I'll get that. And I've already ordered one or two products off of Twitter, so I'm new to this kind of, you can call it, it's not Amazon shopping, it's Twitter shopping. But Elon Musk wants to expand it. He also wants to expand dramatically the payment financial side of Twitter. So Twitter becomes, in a sense, a finance app. You can have your money recorded on a part of Twitter. You can do transactions. So in other words, I'm not sure quite where this is going to go, but it could be that Elon Musk is sort of trying to put a lot of the banks out of business, because banks, after all, have brick and mortar facilities. They have tellers. They charge money for transaction fees. And the idea here is that you remove all that. You bring all of that electronic and you have it all in one place. There are, of course, many other financial apps, but the point is these financial apps are all existing separately. Twitter is an attempt to consolidate people's finances into a single app. So very ambitious plans. And of course, Elon Musk, people said, paid too much for Twitter. But if it turns out that he's able to expand Twitter into this remarkable ecosystem of finance and video and communications, as well as good old tweeting, which I guess is now going to be called Xing, because of the new name, then it will turn out perhaps in retrospect that for Twitter, Elon Musk paid too little. The Durban Accords are the greatest threat to the US dollar's global dominance in the past 80 years. On August 22nd, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa are expected to launch a new international supercurrency fully backed by gold or other commodities. Part of their long-term plan is to supplant the US and the dollar as cornerstones of the global financial system. Well, how can you protect your IRA or 401k from the fallout from this landmark announcement? You can diversify with gold from Birch Gold Group. Historically, gold has been a safe haven in times of high uncertainty, which is right now. Get a free information kit on gold, IRAs, and decide for yourself if a tax-sheltered retirement account backed by physical precious metals is right for you. Text the word Dinesh to 989898. There's a monumental shift happening among nations that control 1/3 of the world's GDP starting August 22nd. So protect your retirement savings. Text Dinesh to the number 989898. Claim your free information kit on gold from Birch Gold today. These days, when we read articles in the mainstream media, the question we need to ask ourselves is not, why is this going on? In other words, we should not assume that what the article is saying is true and take it at face value. Rather, we should ask a different question. What is the underlying agenda behind this article? What is the ideological spin that the media is putting on this article? Here's a case in point. CNBC, which, by the way, is not the worst in terms of ideological bias, but they are carried by the cultural tide, and so they reflect the kind of left-wing presuppositions of the mainstream media. These are America's 10 worst states to live and work in 2023. And I'm thinking, very interesting. So let's start looking at these states, and they start with They have Arkansas, they have Tennessee, they have Florida, which is a big surprise. They have Indiana, they have Missouri, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. First of all, right away, when you see Texas and Florida, you have to laugh out loud because it's inherently preposterous that those are two of the worst states to live in. In fact, I live in one of those two, Texas, and I can affirm that it's actually a very well-run state. It doesn't have the natural beauty, say, of California, but guess what? If you walk into the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles in California, if you walk in the morning, you're not going to get out until the afternoon. You walk into the DMV in Texas, you'll be out 30 minutes later. So the idea that somehow these are Texas and Florida are included in the 10 worst states, right away your antenna, your suspicions need to go up. But then you notice something else, and that is that as you go down the list, and many of these states are in the South, but not all of them, you realize every single one of them is a red state. Every one of them is a Republican state. And you go, wait a minute, are you saying that Republican states are inherently worse to live in than Democratic states? Now, there are some Democrats who do think this, but there is one kind of powerful kind of refutation to this theory, and that has to be contended with. If you're going to write an article, if you're going to claim that these are the worst states, then you have to deal with this problem. And what's the problem? Well, the problem is that people from the blue states are moving to the red states, and they are especially moving to Texas and to Florida. Now, why are they moving to Texas and Florida? At one point, Trump, in an effort to undercut DeSantis, goes, well, they're obviously moving just for the sunshine. I think they're moving for the sunshine and a whole lot more. They're moving to a very well-run state. They're moving to a state that has economic opportunity, upward mobility, ethnic diversity, not diversity in the ideological sense, but you've got Cubans, you've got Venezuelans, you've got blacks, you've got whites, you've got older people, you've got young people. So it's diverse in all kinds of ways. Crime rates are relatively low, particularly, now crime rates are higher in some of the Florida cities, but they're still lower than cities elsewhere. So it makes sense. People are voting with their feet. You might have heard the phrase, well, you've heard the phrase, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but there's a kind of play on that. Immigration is the sincerest form of flattery. And if people are emigrating away from blue states and toward red states, that tells you something. So you would think that these CNBC guys would be like, yeah, we got to consider, because what they're really saying is that the people who are moving, say, from California to Texas are wrong. They're fools. They should stay in California. It's a better place to live. And then when you begin to read the article and the fine print, you begin to realize that this article is itself a joke, because it's not looking at the things that really matter to people. In other words, it's looking at things like climate ideology and what is the state doing to combat the climate crisis. Well, number two, they're looking at they are looking at the trans issue. Is the state hospitable to trans people? Well, I mean, if you're writing in the trans magazine and you want to tell trans people where's the best place for trans people to live, that's a whole different thing. But why would it affect non-trans people as to what policies a state has toward trans people? So here's a classic example of how the criteria, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. You set up, this is like the climate models themselves, by the way. You set up a set of criteria. You feed data in that plays to that criteria. Another one, by the way, a big one for CNBC, abortion rights. So obviously Texas, because Texas basically outlaws abortions at this point as a practical matter. Florida has restrictions on abortion. It's not a complete ban. I think it's a 15-week limit on when you can have an abortion. So the idea is that these southern states are more pro-life, they're more anti-abortion, and therefore they limit your reproductive rights. So guess what? You may not want to move to that state. Well, I mean, look, if you're looking to have an abortion, maybe don't move to those states or travel someplace else. But the idea that the state itself becomes unlivable because it's not providing these abortion rights, just again, preposterous, laughable. The whole thing is a big joke. So what happens now here is that you begin by, in the old days, we'd read an article and we'd be like, wow, this is very interesting. Let's debate the facts as described in the article. But now I read the article and I'm thrown back to who wrote the article? What's the media outlet that put out this propaganda? What is their underlying agenda? And let's ferret it out. So this is a kind of new way of reading. It's also obviously a new way of watching TV. Never assume when you go on CBS or you go on PBS or listen to NPR. Oh, it's very disturbing. And Debbie was telling me this morning, that there's reports that it's indubitable that the spike in temperatures across the South is the result of man-made climate change. Again, instead of going, yeah, of course it is, or what can we do about it? You now ask, wait a minute, this is the middle of the summer, and it's probably going to get a little bit hotter. And then there are hot days, and then there are cooler days. So if the heat is explained by climate change, what about the cooling trends? And eventually it's going to get cool. And what if we have a cold front in the fall? And what if we have a severe winter? So how is this data being manipulated? That's the point to make. And I think we see it very dramatically in this article about the blue states and the red states. I think the simple fact that people are moving from blue to red tells you pretty much all you need to know. Bank failures, record inflation, spy balloons, mass layoffs. It's a recipe for disaster if your investments are unprotected, if they're with a typical financial advisor. But my friend Rebecca Walser is different. You've seen her on the podcast. She's a wealth strategist, a tax attorney. She has her global MBA from the London School of Economics. Rebecca told her clients to get out of equities back at the end of 2021. She got it right when most advisors got it wrong. And well, who had to pay the price? You as the consumer. So don't let blind loyalty or habit leave you losing money. Call Rebecca Walser's office today to protect your wealth from the market uncertainty. Debbie and I did a call with Rebecca's team to talk about our investments, and you should too. Go to friendofdinesh.com to book a call with Rebecca's team today. That's friendofdinesh.com to protect your investments and your future. There's some new information that has come out about the government of Australia and its participation in censorship on a whole series of digital platforms, from Twitter. This is the old Twitter before Elon Musk bought it, but also Meta, Instagram, YouTube, Google, and so on. Now, the interesting thing about this report is that it shows it's based upon public information claims on the type of censorship that the Australian government has been doing. And the Australian government hasn't been doing it directly. So it's not that the Australian government messages Instagram or YouTube or Facebook. Rather, the Australian government gives a bunch of money to an intermediate organization it's called World Services Australia. And it is an affiliate of a London-based global communications firm called MNC Saatchi. And so this firm plays the middle role. So the firm does all the screening, the firm gets all the recommendations from the Australian government, then passes them on to the digital platforms, and that's how people get censored. Now, when you begin to look at what is being censored, there were 4,000 digital posts that were censored. And these posts all carried valid information, or they presented well-reasoned and legitimate perspectives challenging the COVID narrative. So this is not a case, in the public discourse, well, we're restricting misinformation and disinformation because, misinformation can be very dangerous. Well, in a few cases, you do have posts that put out misinformation, but we're not talking about that. There are many cases where posts get censored, or they get restricted, or they get shadow banned, as they say. And this happens because what they're saying is true, but inconvenient. It is true, but it contradicts the narrative that not only the Australian government, but many other governments were putting out. So let's look at an example. Here's a post from April 21, says, COVID-19 vaccine does not prevent COVID-19 infection or COVID-19 transmission. This is 100% true. The vaccine does not do either of those two things. It cannot be counted on to do those things. Even though the post is accurate, it was deemed as violating Instagram's community guidelines. So another way to put it is community guidelines at Instagram are banning stuff that is true. And we will also find out putting out their own stuff that is false. Because think about it, if it is false according to Instagram to say this, then Instagram is promoting the opposite narrative, which is what? Which is that the COVID-19 vaccine does prevent COVID-19 infection and it does prevent COVID-19 transmission. And that's false. Now, here's another tweet. This is also from April 2021. It claims that COVID-19 originated from a laboratory in Wuhan, China, and was funded by the US government. This was deemed a conspiracy theory, an offense by Twitter, even though US intelligence now, many intelligence agencies, the FBI director Christopher Wray, have all said that this is a plausible theory. It may not be a proven theory, but it's certainly legitimate to offer it, to say, hey, this is in contention, let's consider the merits of this theory, as opposed to simply taking it down. So we see here in Australia what we've also been seeing in the United States, and that is what they're censoring is not misinformation, it's not disinformation, it's what may be called malinformation. Malinformation is information that's true, but bad, and bad only for them, not bad for us. It's how can something that's true be bad? But it's bad for their narrative, it's bad for their propaganda. And so the censorship is not in the service of truth, it's in the service of supporting a narrative and promoting propaganda. If aches and pains are your problem, Relief Factor is your solution. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor, a couple of years ago. The difference we've seen in our joints, nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. How does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do exercises that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a huge game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. Guys, I'm really happy to welcome back to the podcast our friend Myra Flores. She is the first Mexican-born woman to be elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. She served as with the 34th District of Texas. And after her historic special election victory in 2022, she is going to be running again, it seems like, in 2024, which I'm very excited about. Her website, MyraFloresForCongress.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at MyraFlores_TX for Texas. Myra, welcome. Great to have you. And your life story is so remarkable. Someone not even born in America who made it to the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're going to be trying again next year. But start by talking a little bit about your life story and how you came by the values that have shaped your life.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. Well, I was born in Burgos, Tamaulipas, Mexico, and I was raised with conservative values. That is just who we are. I don't know any other way of living, but I was always raised to put God and family first. And that's how it's always been. It's in my DNA. It's just who I am. And I believe that my conservative values, the values that I was raised with, are more important than a political party. For me, that's more important, our values. And I was blessed to come here to the United States. My father, became an American citizen. He filed for us to be able to come here to the United States. But my grandfather is from here. He was actually born here in Texas. And so our roots have always been here in Texas. And I was blessed to come here, of course. And both my parents were migrant workers. They moved a lot growing up. And I actually started working alongside my parents. I worked in the cotton fields. And I also worked in the onion field as well. And I definitely did not want to do that for the rest of my life. And so my dad always instilled in me and my mom to keep on, going to school and getting myself an education. Graduated from San Benito and went to college at South Texas College and became a respiratory care practitioner. I'm a proud Border Patrol wife. I am a mother of 4, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I've accomplished the American dream. But I always tell people all the time that the American dream wasn't accomplished when I got to Washington. I had accomplished the American dream way before that. I went to Congress to protect the American dream. And I always tell people all the time that we take it for granted. Most of us living the American dream and not know it. So, I tell people all the time, Washington is not the American dream. The American dream was accomplished way before that. And I ran for Congress to protect the American dream. So our kids also have the same opportunities that I've had. If someone like me come from Mexico, can come here, get an education, and have a career, raise her children, my husband as well. My husband's parents, he's a Border Patrol agent, but his parents are from Matamoros, Tamaulipas. So his parents are also from Mexico. And he's accomplished the American dream. So I just feel that this country is worth fighting for. It is the most beautiful country I know. I'm in love with this country. I wish people would see the United States of America with my eyes, with the migrants' eyes, because a lot of us that come here to the United States, we don't take nothing for granted. We appreciate all the opportunities and the freedoms, because so many other countries that, where we're from don't have the opportunities, and countries like Venezuela and Cuba don't have the freedoms. And a lot of people here, I feel that were born here, take it for granted. I see them burning and disrespecting our flag. I see them burning down businesses and communities. And it's like, how can you do that to your own country? It breaks my heart. And I'm just not going to allow them to destroy this country that's given me and my family so much for decades.
Do you think, Myra, that is the key to it? In other words, the fact that because you've seen a different way of life in a different country, as I have, born in India, coming to America as a teenager, that we tend to compare America to other existing countries. And so we recognize that even if there are flaws and imperfections here, we're always saying compared to what? Whereas if if you have someone in the United States, they could be like, I can't believe that we still have racism in America. And so they're comparing America to some ideal, to the Garden of Eden, to some notion of perfection. And then they become very bitter that America does not live up to that ideal. Do you think that's why you have this ingratitude that to you and me seems so incomprehensible?
Absolutely, because we know what it's like to live on the other side. I have family in Mexico that have been waiting for many years to come here to the United States. I have friends in Mexico that would give anything to have an opportunity to come here to the United States. And I see people here just take it for granted, constantly disrespecting our country. And, I find it crazy. It blows my mind. And I wish, honestly, we could do a trade-off. I wish we could send those people that don't love and appreciate our country, send them to Venezuela, send them to Cuba, and leave them there. No, one way, that's it.
And bring some people here who believe in the American dream and want to work hard and want to contribute to the country. We'll be right back with Myra Flores. It's MyPillow's 20th year anniversary, and over that time, they've sold more than 80 million MyPillows. Wow, Mike Lindell at MyPillow wants to thank each and every one of you by giving you the lowest price in history on his MyPillows. You will receive a queen-size MyPillow for $19.98, regular price $69.98, and just $10 more for a king-size. You get deep discounts on all the MyPillow products, the bed sheets, the mattress toppers, the pet beds, mattresses, my slippers, the robes, and so much more. This is the time to try out some of Mike Lindell's other amazing products that you don't have, but you've sort of had your eye on. Go to mypillow.com, receive promo code Dinesh to get this amazing offer on the queen size MyPillow for $19.98, or you can call 800-876-0227. The offer comes with a 10-year warranty, a 60-day money-back guarantee. It's time to start getting the quality sleep you deserve. So go ahead and call 800-876-0227 or go to mypillow.com. Don't forget to use the promo code DINESH Dinesh. I'm back with the one and only Myra Flores. She is the former U.S. Congresswoman, 34th District of Texas. She's running again in 2024. Her website, Myra, M-A-Y-R-A, Flores, for Congress.com. Myra, let's talk about the race. Let's talk about the Rio Grande Valley. This has been a blue part of Texas for kind of as long as we can remember. But it looks like there are some winds of change blowing in the Rio Grande Valley. Your candidacy was a perfect reflection of that. Now, you didn't win the last time, but you came pretty close. Do you think that the momentum is toward the GOP over time? And what are you going to do differently this time in order to close that margin? What was it, 8 points that separated you from Vicente, the guy who was able to beat you the last time around?
So we won the special election in June, right? That was a Biden 4 district. So it was a very different map. Due to redistricting, it changed. So we won a Biden +4 in the special by 7 points. After that, unfortunately, we went into redistricting and our map changed completely. And it made it 4 times harder for us to win our re-election. It became a Biden +16 after redistricting, but we still worked very hard. We didn't give up. We knocked on thousands of doors. We actually were the number 1 door knockers and thousands of phone calls as well. But we ran out of time. I felt that, the momentum was on our side, of course. But unfortunately, we came close, but we did overperform. We overperformed 8 points, almost 9 points. And I'm very, very proud of that, because so many people throughout the United States, were losing Republican districts. There a lot of people on the Republican side, unfortunately, stayed home, during the midterm. So we definitely have to work harder in getting people out to vote. It is very important because at the end of the day, if we don't go out and vote, it doesn't matter. Right. So we can complain about, elections, and we got to make changes. We got to improve our elections. And here in the state of Texas, we've done a great job in every session improving that. We make it easier for people to vote, but harder for people to cheat. So it's so important that we continue putting pressure on the state on making elections, easier to vote, but harder to cheat. So the people are, confident and they trust the process. And unfortunately, a lot of people, just didn't trust the process and stayed home. But that's not the way to make an impact, because when we stay home, it's giving them a vote. And I'm hoping that, we get all people, the American people, out to vote, and that we hear their voices loud and clear. And one of the main things that I'm going to be doing is focusing, honestly, there's not a lot of different things that I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to change who I am, right? It's just, I'm going to continue staying true to myself, focusing on the district, focusing on the people, on the kitchen table issues, the border, the economy. Child trafficking is, very important to me, and it should be to all of us, especially after watching Sound of Freedom. I think that it's awakened a lot of people, and it's made people realize that we need to get more involved. I don't care where these children are from. We should be protecting all children and keeping them safe. And border security is a way to keep these children safe. And we got to put in prison for the rest of their life those who are involved in child trafficking, because the United States is the number 1 consumer, but Mexico is the number 1 supplier. And we got to end child trafficking in the United States and, of course, around the world.
Myra, imagine if I were a Democrat, moderately conservative, as many Democrats are down in the Rio Grande Valley, but I've been voting Democrat time after time after time, and I'd say, why should I vote for you, Myra Flores? What would you say to me?
What has the Democrat done for you? What has the Democrat done for you? They claim to be the party of the poor, and they are. They are the party of the poverty. That's all they do is create poverty. I'm here to give you an opportunity. I want you and your children and your grandchildren to be able to stay here in South Texas and accomplish the American dream. I don't want our children to leave South Texas to find better opportunities, because that's exactly what's happening. Our children leave South Texas for better opportunities. Why can't they stay here and accomplish the American dream here in South Texas? Why can't we become leaders and not followers? Because that's what's happening right now. Vicente Gonzalez, he's a follower. He does not prioritize our district. And it is time that Washington prioritizes South Texas. We have been ignored for decades. We have been taken for granted for decades. It is time that our people in South Texas are first. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you and your children first than anything else.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more with Myra Flores. Guys, I'd like to invite you to check out my Locals channel. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that's censored that you won't find on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You also get a kind of personal side of Dinesh, and you can interact with me directly. I do a weekly live Q&A every Tuesday. That's today. No topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some very cool films to Locals, documentaries, feature films, both my films and films by other independent producers. 2000 Mules is up there, and I'm doing a big film, new one this year. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on Locals. If you're an annual subscriber, you can see all these movies and stream them and watch them for free. So check out my channel at dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. I'm back with Myra Flores, her website, MyraFloresForCongress.com. You can follow her on Twitter at MyraFlores_TX for Texas. Myra, there are kind of two ways to approach a sort of swing district like the one that you're going to be running in next year. One is to sort of downplay party differences and to run a campaign that's really more focused on your story. And I think that part of that is very effective because you have a great story to tell. But a lot of it on the other side is that you have a lot of Democrats who don't realize how radical the Democratic Party has become. Radical on abortion, radical on the issue of trans propaganda in the schools, radical on cultural and social and moral issues where if they knew, they'd be like, wow, I didn't really know I was voting. I thought I was just voting for a little bit more of a secure life and the government looking after me when I'm old. This is completely different from me being on board with all this craziness. And my question is there a way for you to show people in a nice way that, hey, the party that your father voted for, maybe your grandfather in the 1940s, is not the Democratic Party of today? Make the party also the issue and not just your personal story. What do you think of that?
Well, it's very important to always stay true to yourself. Yes, winning an election is important, but I will always stay true to myself and I will not lose my integrity to win an election. So it's very important that we prioritize that. And you're right, it's all about education. I've knocked on so many doors and I will continue. That's what it takes. It takes people to be informed. They don't know that the Democrat Party of today supports abortion up to 9 months with no restrictions. They don't know that the Democrat Party of today wants to transition their children, that wants to inject puberty blockers in their children, that if they don't support gender ideology, they want to remove their children out of their home. That's exactly what's happening in the state of California, Washington, New York, and many of the Democrat states. They're taking away the parents, their children, if they don't support gender ideology. For example, the mother of Yaeli Martinez, her daughter was taken away from her at 16 years old in California. And then her daughter started transitioning at a very young age, and it caused her to commit suicide. So she lost her daughter. So these are real stories. These are not, made up stories. No, I wish it wasn't real, but it is. And it's not the party that we grew up in. It's not the party that my father also supported for many years, for many decades. My father was a Democrat all his life, and he does not recognize today's Democrat Party. But it's going to take us to invest in the Hispanic community. The 22 cycle was the first time Republicans invested in South Texas, in the Hispanic community in South Texas. So it's so important that we continue investing in the Hispanic community, because now the Hispanic are the majority in the state of Texas. So it's so important that we invest in educating our community that is already conservative. You don't have to convince us to be pro-God, pro-life, pro-family, pro-work. That is who we are. It's in our DNA, but we got to invest in the Hispanic community. So I'm so glad that the Republican Party will continue to invest in the Hispanic community in South Texas and throughout the state and throughout the country, because it is very important. And at the end of the day, we're all Americans, right? We all bleed red. We all have the American values. So that's what's most important to me.
It seems to me, Myra, that a lot of the reason that you got Democrats who haven't kind of woken up to the Democratic Party is because in between the Democratic Party and the ordinary citizen is the media. And so, for example, what you just described about this woman, the transitioning, the 16-year-old, those stories are probably not told very often on the local news in Harlingen or in McAllen and so on, so that the media is running a sort of cover for the Democrats. So it seems to me the burden on the Republicans in general, and you also, is how do you get around the media? How do you get your message out so that the ordinary citizen is able to hear what you have to say? Anything that we can do, by the way, Debbie and I, to help you to do that, we would love to do as we go toward next year, because it seems to me critical to get the full story out to people. Like you say, you don't have to convince them to change their values. Their values are actually fine. You have to convince them that you've got a party that is no longer in sync with those values. But to do that, you sort of have to do what Reagan did. You have to sort of jump over the heads of the media. Do you agree?
You're you're absolutely right. So I believe that we got to do our own media, right? We got to do our own commercials. It's so important that we do commercials on educating our community, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I felt that we allowed the Democrat Party on the last cycle, to run on this narrative. We completely ignored, the abortion issue, when they're the extremists. They're the ones that support abortion up to 9 months with no restrictions, and yet they painted us as the extremists. For example, my opponent told the elderly community in South Texas that I was going to take away their Social Security. And the elderly community believed it. A lot of the elderly community believed it, that Myra Flores was going to be taking away their Social Security, when I don't have the power to do that. And I would not do that, because that is their hard-earned money. It's the other way around. It's the Democratic Party's overspending that is hurting Social Security. And that's the reason why we're wanting to protect Social Security, wanting to look into this, because if not, the Democrat Party will finish the money that is on the Social Security. But a lot of lies, a lot of misinformation. We got to fight back. We can't stay quiet and just allow them to run with these crazy narratives. They're the extremists. So I think that we need to fight harder and, not be afraid to fight back. So that's, I learned a lot, and that's something that I learned, that we have to fight back these lies, and we can't just ignore them.
Myra, absolutely. We wish you all the best for the campaign next year. We will like to do our part to help. Guys, check it out.
Thank
Myra
you.
Flores for Congress.com. Myra, always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you.
I'd like to offer some comments on the controversy over Florida's new African American history standards. And as often happens, instead of reviewing these standards, instead of looking at what is being taught, what the left is doing is focusing on a single line, one line. And then they act as if this is a clear example of how the standards are horrible. Florida is not trying to teach real history. And so let's even look at the one line, because here's the one line they're talking about. It's in connection with the instruction on slavery. Slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for their personal benefit. Now, this has caused a lot of outrage. Kamala Harris goes down there, quote, "How is it that anyone could suggest that in the midst of these atrocities that there was any benefit to being subjected to this level of dehumanization?" Blah, blah, blah. A lot of, I would call it feigned outrage. This is pretend outrage where people appear indignant. They're not genuinely indignant. And some of this debate is focused in a narrow way on the line itself. Well, the line itself is actually largely accurate. Slaves developed skills. Start there. True, because slaves were masons, they were carpenters, they were agricultural workers. They began to learn all kinds of things about getting things fixed. In fact, it was the lazy slave owners that did nothing. So the lazy slave owners had no skills. The slaves did in fact have skills, which in some instances, so the line is cautious, it's not saying always, in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. Now, it's a fact that in order to motivate slaves, that in a number of plantations across the South, the slave owners would offer the slaves an opportunity to keep a portion of what they did or what they produced. So, for example, if slaves were producing grain, they were able to keep some of that grain for themselves. So the line by itself saying that the slaves could then deploy their skills to some benefit, not to mention the fact that when slavery ended, these slaves were now, of course, free men. They were able to take those same skills that were under slavery and use them elsewhere. So just looking at the statement itself, not attempting any large-scale comment about slavery, either pro or con, just looking at the sentence in itself, there's nothing wrong with it. And presumably it's not the only sentence being taught about slavery. No one even claims that. But where I want to go with this is in a little bit of a different direction. And that is, let's take Kamala Harris's statement. How is it that anyone could suggest that there was any benefit to being subjected to this level of dehumanization? Well, one person who suggested this turns out to be a descendant of slaves himself, one Muhammad Ali. Now, I mentioned this before in the podcast, but it's relevant in this context. Muhammad Ali, remember, in 1974, went down to Zaire, the African nation of Zaire, fought against George Foreman for the heavyweight title, won the heavyweight title, comes back to America, is asked as he gets off the plane by a journalist, "Hey champ, what did you think of Africa?" And Ali replies this. He said, "Thank God my granddaddy got on that boat." And while this is an Ali quip, some people would say it's a joke. Well, it's one of those things that is a joke, but not just a joke, because Ali's making a point, and the point is that dehumanizing though slavery was, it was also the transmission belt that brought the descendants of slaves, including pretty much, well, just about every black person born today, but certainly Muhammad Ali himself, brought them into the orbit of Western freedom. So what are the chances that Muhammad Ali could have become Muhammad Ali had he lived, for example, in Zaire or in Somalia or in the Congo? Answer, very unlikely. What is the chance that so many people who have made it in America, what is the chance that my life in America would be the same if I had stayed in India? Here is a comment by the African-American pastor Eugene Rivers, and this is from his important essay published a number of years ago. It was about he's talking about the responsibility of intellectuals, and he's talking about the nihilism of the inner city. And I just want to read a few lines. He's talking about the fact that since entry into labor markets is dependent on education and skills, we see a generation of economically obsolete Americans. He's talking about blacks in the inner city. And then he says, but remarkably, the tragedy we face is worse. Unlike many of our ancestors who came out of slavery and entered this country with strong backs, discipline, a thirst for literacy, deep religious faith, and hope in the face of monumental adversity, we have produced a generation who do not know the ways of the Lord, a new jack generation ill-equipped to secure gainful employment even as productive slaves. So what Eugene Rivers is saying is that, look, the slaves didn't just have skills. They had skills, but they also had strength, emotional strength and moral strength. They were sustained by their belief in Christianity, that the Lord would one day deliver them. And so they were not subject to the kind of nihilism and despair that you see in a lot of inner city, not just ghettos, but barrios and American Indian reservations today. So he says that this generation who would be ineligible to qualify for slavery, people wouldn't even want them as slaves. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because what we have with Kamala Harris and so on is the little tap dance that they love to do about ancient slavery, paying no attention to African Americans today who have difficult lives in the inner city, who are facing, in Eugene Rivers' analysis, a condition in some ways even worse. And yet the Democrats leave those problems unaddressed because all they want to do, well, they also want to hide the complicity of the Democratic Party in slavery. That's a story for another day. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that they like to play these little games, claiming, we can't believe that the Florida standards are saying this. And in reality, there are all kinds of contemporary problems that are festering and going unaddressed.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.